And we're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are continuing our August in the Asylum theme, where we have been talking about films that have something to do with being in an asylum of some sort. So why don't I let Roger tell us what the movie is about for tonight, and tell us what it's all about.
Well, everyone, we're in a real treat today. We got a really great movie that came out about 1984 called Amadeus. It's all about, kind of takes part in the older, like sometime in the, was it in the 1800s with Mozart.
1700s.
1700s. Anyways,
late 18th century, early 19th century.
Yep. Well, anyways, you have two composers. We have Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart on one, and then we have Solinari as the other. And these two great composers have some sort of one-sided rivalry because Solinari wants to have glory and immortality through his music, and he is hell-bent in making it happen. Unfortunately, circumstances are kind of working against him because Mozart happens to be the greatest genius of music at that time. So this particular movie is all about this particular rivalry. Throughout the movie, we have all kinds of music from Mozart and folk music, period time folk music, and don't forget that Amadeus is not necessarily an accurate representation of what happened in the actual history of Mozart and Solinari. It's based on an earlier play, which was called Amadeus, and it came out a few years prior, in 1979. And of course, and ironically, Amadeus was based on another much earlier play that was, of course, let me look like my notes real quick. About 1830 from some Russian composer, or playwright, should I say. So this is it's kind of an interesting movie since it has so much backlog on it and music that maybe people have not heard of before. Anyways, to take it on, this movie is basically has two main characters. We have Solinari and we have Mozart. And let's start with our thoughts on. Let's go with Solinari since he's the main character. Basically, he's the main character. To tell you the truth, but
Or first impressions.
Oh yeah.
First let's do that. Okay, sure. Let's go with Dane.
It's Antonio Salieri. We need to make the pronunciation. You get that right. Yeah. So
I'm sure I'll make it. I'm sure I'll make all kinds of issues with different kinds of pronunciations.
Yeah, well, I'm just, for everyone, it's Salieri, it's Italian, but yeah, so first impressions, boy, so this film I saw back when I would have been, I want to say middle school age, and I don't think I finished it at the time, and then I did finish the whole thing years later, and I did see the director's cut, which is 20 minutes longer, and reason being just because they had some stuff they had to trim, but it gave them more scenes to just knit everything together a little bit more fully and a little bit more devoted to the music and that kind of stuff. I mean, I wouldn't have noticed. I think it tells a very complete story in its form, but it is a masterpiece of filmmaking. I mean, we've gushed about Milos Forman in our One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest episode, which he won Best Director for. Here he wins Best Director again for Amadeus, and this film also won Best Picture. It won 8 Oscars total, and it's a masterpiece. It really is. I mean, the screenwriting, the direction, the acting is brilliant. The themes, and of course Mozart's music and Salieri's music, but mostly Mozart's music feature prominently. Yeah, it's just this filmmaking. This is, it's what every department, what it does well. And, I can gush about each one all day long. I will say that In college I read the play, Peter Schaffer's play Amadeus, which preceded the film. The play is very different structurally. It's because it's a play, so there's it's mostly Salieri talking to the audience instead of talking to a priest for his confession or anything like that. And apparently, and I haven't actually seen the play; I just read it. Apparently, there's a lot music in the play because it's more about the drama. Structurally, it's completely different. There are almost no lines of dialogue that carry over from play to script. But the nice thing is that it is still Peter Schaffer's script, so he still wrote it. He just did a totally different version of his own story. But I would argue that the film is actually better because, well, it shows a wider scope. You got all the outfits and all the beautiful settings in Prague and everything that Prague is substituting for Vienna in this thing. In terms of the filming location, but then you've also got the music. I mean, a lot of the movie is rightfully devoted to hearing Mozart's music and watching him compose it, and all of that. But it's like the filmmakers described music as the third character, and music itself is Mozart's music. I think you can really see that, and they give enough time for the music to do what it does and to have the power that it has. So it's in many ways it's kind of everything else is wonderful, with the setting and acting, but they also take the time to let Mozart's music speak for itself, and the power of it is just undeniable. So yeah, A plus all around.
Okay. Next up is Dave's first impression of Amadeus.
Well, I'd first seen this in music class years ago, bits and pieces of it, because our teacher wanted us to learn different aspects of the film. And then later I picked up the director's edition, and I've at least watched it once. It was filmed in the year of my birth. So that's also a plus, I guess. But I remembered thinking, at least the second time around, that my God, is Mozart annoying. With that laugh of his.
That version of Mozart, if anything.
They're all so wonderful. Why don't I have heads?
And that is, to me, the epitome of what a fop really is. At least at that time, that's what they were called. Little dandelions on with the lords and ladies of the ton. But to
be fair, what was the line between a fop and a non at that time, given the fashion?
Right.
By the way, on that note, actually, actor Tom Hulsey, who played Amadeus Mozart, is gay.
Yeah, and there have been some questions about the real Mozart's sexuality, but at the same time, very little is actually known about Mozart himself. I think we know more about him than we do William Shakespeare, but even then, the circumstances of his death are very mysterious to this day.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's why the circumstances have been so mythologized.
I very much feel like in this film, they kind of, in a sense, portrayed Mozart as like a Don Juan character, partially because of the Don Juan Giovanni that was later, shown in the film, and I think the director kind of adapted it to the rest of the story in Mozart's life, maybe thinking that he was some kind of a libertine. But I really loved the production design behind this particular film. I loved how in set time it was. I love the different pianos that were shown throughout the film. I love the style of the period, and it's just so elegant, and it worked well for the set pieces at the time. So I really enjoyed this film, seeing it again, and I can't help but thinking that F. Murray Abraham. I saw him not too long ago on Star Trek: Next Generation on an episode. So I'm seeing he played an alien race that was like had the space deterred, and just the way that the age makeup here, it just kind of reminded me of that.
Now, if ever there was an actor who should have played Victor Frankenstein, it's F. Murray Abraham. Because the way that he plays Salieri in this film, to me, reminded me so much of how I would love to see Victor Frankenstein played someday. Yep. Yeah. And Tom Hulce, who I had known previously from Animal House, man, does he show his stuff. He really shows his stuff in this, and they both were nominated for Best Actor, so one of them had to lose, and ultimately it went to F. Murray Abraham, which is fine because Salieri is the main character, despite him not being the title character.
Okay, Forrest, what was your first impressions of Amadeus?
Okay, so this actually was a first time watch for me. I feel like so far I'm the only one on this panel that didn't watch it in music class.
Neither did I. So I didn't.
Okay, so that makes
I didn't watch it in music class. I watched it on my own.
Okay, or I didn't watch it. I wasn't assigned to watch it in school. This is the first time watch. I knew of this movie, but one thing I love about doing this show is that it forces me to finally get around to watching these kinds of movies. I think it was really well done. You've got an all-star cast. Abraham, Hulse, Christine Ebersol, Jeffrey Jones, Vincent Schiavelli, and an early role for Cynthia Nixon. Quite a few names I recognize. Quite a few names I recognized. Like I said, the costume design, the set pieces, and of course the music. It was all since that's the focus. That's kind of the focus of these characters. It was all really well done. Both of them are I think both Salieri and Mozart, you love them and you hate them. You feel for you feel for them too. And it's just it was just very so much to take. It was just so much to take in. But I think it was really well. It was very well done, extremely well done. I can see why it won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Hey,
definitely.
Is there anything more you want to say for us?
I think that's all for now. I will say I will definitely say I have, as far as favorites, I definitely know what I will. Well, I'll save that for the end of the show.
Sure. SeptumSin, you're next. What's your first impressions of the show?
I probably saw it the earliest of most of us here. My father showed this to me, which is a lot of classic film, when I was a fairly small child, not super small, probably 8 or 9, maybe I want to say. But he, my father was an opera singer actually in the past.
Oh.
And sang for St. Louis Metropolitan Opera for a few years until circumstances made it so he could not perform anymore. But so he had always a huge appreciation whenever there was something that was musically inclined, or especially when opera was involved, which of course was very much so in this. Lots of opera involved in this particular film.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how dark the film was as a small child watching it, and how scary when Salieri dresses up as his father in that costume. The
Mm.
that is a that itself was frightening to me as a small child. I didn't get a lot of the complexity of the tones and all of that just because, well, when you're that little, of course you're not going to be getting that much complexity out of a film. Well, unless you're maybe Mozart. And but still, I did get a lot out of it, and to this day, the film is nice. It's just such an epic film. It's really hard to just sit down and watch. And I had to get this Blu-ray copy. I have this digibook, which had
I have
the
that one too.
director's cut on it, and I always had to have that one because that was such a perfect edition of the film. So I finally had gotten it, and then it had sat on my shelf for many years until this was chosen, and gave me an excuse to finally sit down and watch the 3-hour monster again.
Mhm.
And I am very thankful for it because as an adult, I have gained a lot more appreciation for it, for the acting, the art design, the production, all of it together. A beautiful film, an amazing film, and an epic on all levels.
Okay, well, next up is Kotobukijake. So, what do you think? What do you think about Amadeus?
All right. Well, Amadeus is definitely one I have a long history with. I could not say when I first saw it. I'm quite sure my dad also introduced me to this one because he was a big musician. He was a big music lover, and he appreciated movies about music. So I'm quite sure he was the one that put this forward. I could not say when, though. I know I was much younger. And I've seen it a few times over the years. It's been a while since the last time I saw it, so it was really nice to revisit it. But if I had to guess, this is probably a fourth viewing, maybe, at least in the entirety. And I've always liked the film. I think Brandon, I think you just made the point of, you catch more as you get older. Definitely, I appreciated some things this go around. I don't know if I did before. I do somewhat agree with Dave's description that Mozart himself is a little obnoxious in this film. And I was reading in the trivia that he says he based the laugh on a director that he had. He was never named the director, but he supposedly based it on a director's laugh that he had worked with. I'm also fascinated that both the former and actual Jokers, Tim Curry and Mark Hamill, both auditioned for Mozart and have played the role on Broadway. I think that's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's badass. Well, and actually, the original Broadway Mozart, Simon Callow, is in this as well. He plays the musician who runs the vaudeville at Mozart Pals Around with. Yeah. So they got.
So he was the one that played him on Broadway.
Yes, he was the original Mozart in the Broadway play. Which, as I said before, I don't think you're here for. Were you here for when I said that the play is very different?
I believe that was right about when I got in. Yeah.
Okay, because the play, it's a great play. Definitely either read it or see it performed. I could only read it, but it's well worth it. It's very different though. Structurally, it's totally different. Dialogue almost doesn't carry over pretty much at all. But you can see why.
Even the
would have made a good basis for a story. But yeah,
even the interview was
even though it's Peter Schaffer, There's no father hearing Salieri's confession or anything. Salieri's just talking directly to the audience.
Well, it makes sense to have a proxy.
Is the content of his speech in those scenes essentially the same, or was that completely redone?
Basically, they kind of did it from scratch. I mean, so in that behind the scenes documentary that I sent to everybody, like the week before, it was basically Peter Schaffer and Forman who sat down. And well, Peter Schaffer he's the only person who gets the screenplay credit. But both of them, just in terms of structure, they hammered out that script for weeks and like hated each other by the end. As Milos Forman said, I hated his cooking and he hated my cooking. And I think it's just one of those things that they, being in close proximity, they learn a little too much about each other. But they basically they hammered it out. But again, the script is so damn good, and that's the thing. Like, even though it's virtually nothing like the play, but the play is amazing in and of itself.
Right. It's interesting that it's so rare that and that's another thing you kind of appreciate more as you get older, is that a lot of times people take flack when you have the original author reworking something for a film. And sometimes you get something that is kind of just a watered down version of the original book, play, whatever. And sometimes you get some completely fresh and new and original. And this sounds like it's one of the latter cases. Like, one of the best ones I've seen, of course, is William Goldman with The Princess Bride. But, you very rarely get a complete departure, because the authors tend to be like, but I like how I wrote it before. You know what I mean? It's like,
Peter
so that's
Schaffer
impressive
was
that
able
they were
to just do.
Yeah,
he was able to do the same story, but do it for the medium of film, which is fine, because the actual play is perfect for the medium of a stage play, because they're able to do stuff. And that was a big sticking point with Milos Forman, where he was like, on his stage, everything is stylized. The trees don't look like real trees. And but in the film, is a photography. Everything is real, and he's absolutely right.
So
but that's why
this
they took
is
such care with the production design and with shooting in Prague, because Prague, as he said, due to the communist inefficiency, it's like being back in the 18th century.
Right. Yeah. So generally, my overall impression is that this is a very well done period piece. It's a wonderful celebration of music, but also it's an interesting look at obsession and jealousy and all that fun stuff. And Salieri does play one of the most amusing antagonists. The older Salieri is just, I love the scenes with him. Absolutely love those scenes. And this was F. Murray Abraham's shining moment. I do think he's had some great roles since then, but they're usually variations on this. I probably saw this before Animal House, but when I put 2 and 2 together, that the dude from Animal House was playing Mozart, I was like, it was like a mind blown moment. I was like, really?
He was Pinto. Yep.
But yeah, so overall though, it's a great film. One of the all-time greatest examples of again, there needs to be a use of music in film. This is one of the great examples, because there's hardly an original note of music, but it's great music and it drives the film. And well, there you go.
Yeah, it's I mean, you don't need the original music, because the score that they use is so appropriate and so amazing.
Exactly.
Well, I think everybody got their chance. My first impressions was, believe it or not, I watched this movie years ago just because I looked at the poster and I thought it looked cool. About it.
It
Oh,
is
it
a
is a
cool
cool poster.
It looked
Yeah.
cool. And I said, "What, Amadeus?" And I said, at that time I was I do like classical music. At that time I was kind of transitioning between finding what easy listening or country or something else. So I said, I'll pick it up. And of course, I was thought it's going to be a boring flick, violins and piano music put together and grading chalkboards and all that. But I was blown away. I was really impressed by the Solinari guy that was playing Solinari very much. Of course, I was promptly irritated by Mozart because I was laughing brain like a donkey. But as I got more mature with the movie, I realized there were really good pieces. You'll see right off the bat that they're playing actual pieces from Mozart's repertoire, folk music, as well as a couple things from Solinari. It was a really impactful movie to me. I said, and later on, I went ahead and did buy the soundtrack to it, which is very unusual for me to buy something like this. I like other stuff, but I picked up this song soundtrack just for Don Giovanni. So I got a little snippet of that. I did buy the movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, that's the rest of it. The rest of this is just history.
Actually, what's an interesting
fun fact about the soundtrack. Go for it.
I was going to say an interesting tidbit from my own life experience with the film. I got to see Don Giovanni performed in a theater that had been around in Mozart's time in Vienna.
Wow, that would have been something really cool to watch.
Nice.
Because we were touring at the time.
Well, I've seen Don
trying to sell
Giovanni
our
perform
CD to
live
do it.
too,
So.
but not like that.
We were touring Europe and trying to sell our CD at the time in the choir, and got to sing in various basilicas around Europe, and that was one of the areas. Vienna, still to this day, is probably one of the cleanest cities I've ever been in.
It is.
It has the best pizza.
I've been in Vienna myself, believe it or not, because I've visited many of the areas that The Sound of Music was actually filmed in, and the Opera House is in Vienna, but so is one of Mozart's apartment buildings in Vienna itself. So that was kind of cool to go and see.
Well, so where they were shooting in one of the opera houses, they said that they were filming in the exact spot where the real Mozart had actually premiered Don Giovanni, which is pretty cool. They got to pay homage to the real guy. I too have seen Don Giovanni perform live, but it wasn't in Prague or in Vienna. As much as I would have liked that. Fun fact about the soundtrack. So there were two soundtracks, the first of which has gone on to be one of the best-selling classical music albums of all time, and did kind of help introduce people of that time and of future generations to Mozart's music, which is a really wonderful thing. It's always good to kind of like I assume people of 1998 probably got into Shakespeare because of Shakespeare in Love.
Another Oscar winner.
Well, there will be some ripple effects, people say talk about name somebody from the classical music period. They'll say either Mozart or Beethoven. A few more will say Bach, but it definitely I bought that double CD pack, and I thought the cover looked cool on that one too. So I picked it up.
It's often nice to hear some people actually.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say it's often nice to hear some people actually mention the names of some of the classic composers too, because in this day and age, it seems like the age of classical music is a dying form.
So
It
classical
has been
music
overshadowed.
is yeah.
It's
It's
really
much-
has been overshadowed by the main populist movement, rap music,
It's,
whatever, grunge, whatever it is. But the foundation of all this music is based on classical
I was
music.
gonna say
Mhm.
classical music has more longevity than any modern music to this day.
Yeah.
As I was telling my wife, I doubt that 100 years from now, provided our society is still standing, that they'll be singing "Mbop" from Hanson, but they
Probably not.
but I can guarantee you that stuff from Mozart will probably still be around.
Mozart.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Mozart's
Mbop
up
is
there.
your best example, though.
Mozart is up there with Shakespeare because I mean Shakespeare's got 200 more years
Mhm.
on top of Mozart, you know, in terms of longevity. But we're still performing Shakespeare and readapting him even to this day.
Mhm.
And so I mean Mozart's musical. I mean, he did operas and things, but I mean a lot of the beauty of opera, even though it's sung with a libretto in a particular language, you know, you don't have to know the language to appreciate it. And it even then, you know, most of what he, you know, didn't necessarily need words, but yeah, it's music is the universal language, and I think everybody from any culture can appreciate Mozart. And in fact, I mean, so some interesting things with Mozart as a composer is that they often say, you know, if you need to really concentrate, listen to Mozart because it focuses your brain waves, and it has actually been proven to be true. Because I guess just the way that his pieces are constructed, they're very like mathematical, and their particular patterns, they just focus brainwaves really well. And I've done it, and it has helped quite a bit every time I've done it. So definitely recommend that. But then also, interestingly enough, you talk about, you know, whether society's still standing or whatever. The musical form that actually has the most in common with classical music that is not classical is actually heavy metal music. And you wouldn't think so, but it's actually very true. A whole other discussion, but just another interesting bit of food for thought there.
All right, so there, everybody had their piece to say about what they thought and what their first impressions was with Amadeus.
Well, I just wanted to mention that prior to Amadeus, the closest thing I had been exposed to as far as this movie was the new wave song by Falco that was inspired by this movie.
Amadeus.
Yep.
Wasn't it in Adam Sandler's bedtime stories or something like that?
I did not.
I keep thinking of The Simpsons, where they were doing the Planet of the Apes musical. Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zay.
One of the few Family Guy cutaway gags that I remember finding somewhat amusing was the one that they did of this, which was the it wasn't such and such mocking me, it was God, you know, which is parodying Salieri's and
Right.
and
Yes.
and but I remember that I was like, hey, look at that, because the Family Guy fan base generally gets stereotyped as being pretty dumb, and for good reason. So that was actually like, hey, look at that, they're doing a somewhat of a deep cut for their effort here.
Well, those manatees can pick right ones once in a while.
Yeah, I was going to say
They
as many gags as they've had, they are bound to aim high occasionally.
Yeah, once in a while. Well, it's like, and then meanwhile, I remember South Park did that Lemmy Winks song parody, and I was like, I recognize that as a parody of the Hobbit Rankin Bass special, and apparently a lot of the fan base didn't get that. I was like, you know, wow, Family Guy, you know, South Park is more sophisticated than you, which generally remains true. But anyway.
Okay, well, actually, since everybody had their chance to talk about what their first impressions was, I would like to get into what the movie starts with. Starting to talk about the movie. Of course, we start with a very unfortunate, really cold, wintry, evening. You suddenly have a voice in the open screaming out, "Mozart, forgive your destroyer!" In a great voice over and over again. And from there, you have a quick introduction because I got two servants that were walking by, and they said, "Hey, let's go visit the old man that's spouting off." And they make a very startling discovery after offering some food and enticements and
I
begging.
love how it looks like it's an actual cream puff in a ice cream
Yeah.
Right.
He loved his sweets, as you know.
Open the door or we will eat it.
It's almost like Monty Python-ish.
And have nothing for you. And that's
Just open up the door.
Yeah. And then there's a nice, a slight return of Vincent Chiavelli from our previous Forman film.
Milos Forman film.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's again funny bit about that. So yes, we did see him again. Apparently, with his walk through the snow, apparently Milos take one was like, "Hey, television is ruining you," and then he does another take. "That was wonderful," and he's like, "I don't change," but it just, I don't know. It's funny. And then also, like Milos would say that he puts more, possibly even more care in casting some of the bit parts because of needing to make sure that they're memorable, very memorable faces and memorable. That way you know who's who, and you can really see with the members of Emperor Joseph's court. But even in a small bit part like with Chiavelli, he's only in one scene, but you remember him. He has a very memorable. And again, the other smaller parts, they all have very memorable faces too. So good casting.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Dane. That this whole movie has been as entertaining. From the period works to the costumes to the acting itself. I don't know if there's anything I can see for a flaw. So it's a fantastic film. Anyways, we open up. Finally, the two servants get brave enough to open up the door, and of course now they see an unfortunate Solinari. He has cut his throat. He's this screaming, flopping on the ground, and of course we start into the actual film. So they have some medical people or some people grab a stretcher. They're running over to grab Solinari so they can bring him over to get some medical care. And of course, they have some period music going on. Let's see. I don't remember the piece, but I bet it is Mozart. But anyways, they haul and the Solinari over to
the very first piece is symphony. It's Symphony Number 25 in G minor.
Okay, that's all right because I just didn't place it. Anyways, the people took Solinari over to the hospital, which of course when the scene opens, it almost seems like they're in a sanitarium. All kinds of goofy people, insane people, and it looks like they have taken the unfortunate Solinari to a sanitarium, so they could wait out to some sort of treatment. So it's fascinating because this is a multi-viewpoint kind of film. It seems like to me that you have they call the priest over, and the priest is coming over, and you see from his point of view, and he, of course, finally gets to the place where Solinari's at, and opens up the door, and of course he's hearing this beautiful piano music as he's approaching. He opens up the door, and there's the old man. He doesn't introduce himself first, which is very unique because at first you don't know who this guy really is yet. And take it away, Dane.
Huh? What'd you say?
Do you have any thoughts on this particular scene where the priest approaches the door, opens the door, and they see Antonio Solinari for the first time?
Well, I mean, his introduction as the older version of Salieri is a great character introduction because he does. And again, makeup in this film, one of the things that I don't think talk about enough because of how subtle it is, but how convincing it is. And makeup
Wasn't
in
this one of?
his
Sorry, I was going to say, wasn't this one of the first years where they had a makeup category? Like, because we talked
It
about
was
the
an
fallout
early,
of
an
Elephant Man not getting one. So,
Yeah, it is a
yeah,
shame
it was
about
an
that one.
early. It was one of the earlier ones for sure.
mhm.
But yeah, the makeup in this film is so good because you don't really even notice just how good it is. That's the sign of its quality because it's not screaming like, oh, this is clearly a work of makeup here, even though it is. But it's like you see all the little details of like his wrinkled hands, his kind of cloudy eyes. He looks tired. He looks weary. He looks defeated. And apparently the lens that they used for his eyes hurt to wear, and so they had to have the numbing agents that they use at like the eye doctor's office. They had to put that into F. Murray Abraham's eyes. But he was also really tired in the morning, and so it's like he was able to get into character pretty easily. And it shows, he plays it like a character who's not only old but just defeated by life. Like
Yeah, it's
he
good
lost.
how that.
It's like it's a hollow victory, and he plays it like that.
Yes, sir.
And and as I mentioned before, he's someone like I think everything when he's an old man, it's like he should have played Victor Frankenstein because the structure of the film and the structure of the Frankenstein book are such that like they're Frankenstein telling his story to the captain of the ship, and he also has been kind of led by his own creation in a weird way or his own efforts, and so that's kind of where my brain was kind of coming at it, but yeah, it's everything about the way he plays the older Salieri is beautiful. Now you notice when he actually launches into telling his story, uh, he's still an old man, but then when he's telling about when he was a child in Italy, and you cut back to the present time, and he's like, he clasps his hands, and he's like, he's looking up at the sky as if he's a little boy, and it's like he really like gets into his past self as he's telling the story, and it's like, so
As
not
he's
only is
living
he
in
playing it old, playing he's playing an old man who is remembering it would like to be that young and full of hope, and he really pulls it
Mhm.
off beautifully.
Well, and
Mhm.
a lot of that discussion at the beginning really is the theme that you see throughout the movie. That
Mhm.
theme of I have done everything by the book. I have done the right amount of charity work. I've prayed the right number
Mhm.
of times, and yet I'm not
Yeah.
the one that God has favored. It's
Right.
somebody who is completely
a creeper.
vulgar, who is the
Ogre.
the opposite.
Well, he sums it up early. Actually, I think it was in that first
Yeah.
sequence shortly before we started the flashbacks, or it may have been. No, I take that back. It would have been after they introduced Mozart, but
A bit
it was
early though,
early
yeah.
in the film where he kind of summed it up, and this was a great bit of dialogue that I really liked, and that was where he's like, "All I wanted was to sing to God. He gave me that longing, and then made me mute. Why? Tell me that. If he didn't want me to praise him with music, why implant the desire?" Yeah. And then, and then the other, he kept talking about
Remind
how
me that
vulgar. What's that? Oh, and then the other one where, this was like the first part where you realize how, I think it was the first time he took a confrontational tone with God, and it kind of shocked the preacher there. He like looks at the crucifix and he's like, from now
Really?
on,
yeah.
from now on, we are enemies, you and I, because you chose for your instrument a boastful, lustful, smutty, infantile boy, and gave me for reward only the ability to recognize the incarnation. Like, and in a
Yeah.
sense, I fully get his frustration. And that's probably the biggest theme in the world is in the movie of his frustration over being, as he puts it, a mediocrity who experiences one who has the gift of God but is unworthy of it. And I bet I would be pretty BO too to be in that situation.
Well, that
you can see his struggles throughout.
That is the main theme of the movie, which is that you can work hard, have the desire to be great. You can put in the work. You can seemingly be doing all the right things, and yet there will be people that just naturally have unbelievable talent. They've been touched by God, seemingly, for some greater purpose, and some things just come naturally to some people, and and again, it is very true with prodigies of whatever sort. Like the closest that we have had to a similar stern father who kind of beat the greatness out of him, basically, and made it such that the resulting adult Mozart / Michael Jackson, where they didn't behave like other people around them. Their talent was undeniable. They had all kinds of different struggles and different scandals that dogged them and everything, but it was such that they couldn't really live like normal people. So it wasn't all sunshine and roses as Salieri might perhaps be inclined to think. But point being that there are some people who they work hard then the flip side of it is that Salieri, because he works hard and he does all the kind of more socially acceptable things, he does manage to get the ear of the emperor. I mean, he doesn't give himself enough credit because he has the ear of the emperor of Austria. For God's sakes,
Yeah,
he
also has
he's seemingly risen to the greatest position in his profession at that time, but
actually the emperor,
he wants even greater. He wants immortality.
Yeah, he has a great line about it where he says, "Actually, the man had no ear at all, but what did it matter? He adored my music."
The emperor himself is interesting. I remember looking at the actor and it's like, this guy was all over the 80s and 90s. What happened to him? Oh, and then I looked at the scandal that he was involved in. And then it's like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
But
for Jeffrey Jones,
he was all over everything at one point, though.
Yep.
At that.
Right. Yeah, I remember him being in Beetlejuice and Sleepy Hollow.
It's sad.
First day off.
He's his own worst enemy.
Well, he managed to come back from it, though. He did his time. From what I understand, I think he did the proper, social, it hurt his career bad, but it didn't kill it. Yeah, so that's probably good for him, at least.
I've noticed he has acted in some stuff recently, which is interesting. Though it is amazing how one's actions, or whether if something like that had happened to him just a little bit later, whether it would probably been permanently damning for him. Actually, it's surprising that he's still able to act today, because there is a lack of forgiveness regardless.
Well, again, I think a lot of it.
I would say he's not getting casted in the kinds of productions that he was doing back in the 80s, on the scale that they were in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Oh yeah.
No. Well, but I do think just in terms of an acting talent, though, I will say I think the way that Jeffrey Jones plays. Well, I as an actor, I always thought he was really solid, and very good at playing different kinds of parts. Because Ed Rooney's different than Emperor Joseph here, but the way that he plays the Emperor I love the fact that you're never 100% sure if he's really wise or really stupid.
Oh yeah, I loved how he
Because he's
played
somewhere in
Amadeus.
the middle. Because like there are some
Right.
well, there are some things for which he seems to be pretty damn sharp, and then other things where he either is dumb or he just doesn't really care. Because I could see it either way. Or he just doesn't have any experience because clearly he has no ear for music, as Salieri says. But he also doesn't. To me, he didn't strike me as a dummy either. He seemed like he was pretty skilled with dealing with people and how to not show too many of his cards, and that sort of stuff. Because he's trying to get the people in the court to kind of play against each other so that he can get a consensus, and that's why he's like, or
Well, he
well,
was
there
the
it is.
last.
That's like all he
He
says.
he was the last true emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, uh, so to
Mhm.
speak, before they dissolved and became modern day Germany. So that particular nation
Well,
has always
not
fascinated me, or confederation,
quite
I
yet
should say.
there.
Right.
Okay. Moving on. Forrest, do you have any kind of thoughts about the first opening scene with Solinari and the priest?
I mean, I have to agree that cream, what was that, like a custard or a cream? That looked that looked really good. But
Yeah.
Whatever
yeah,
it was white. Yeah.
but yeah, the opening though, I did really like the makeup job on Salieri.
Mhm.
That was very impressive.
Mhm.
Okay. And Dave, do you have anything else to say about the opening scene with the priest and with Solinari?
I just really think that there's some solid makeup behind F. Murray Abraham. He definitely, as the narrator of the piece, brings the story to the priest in a very roundabout way, and I definitely love the air of mystery that we have about him because he tricks him when it comes to down to the music, and he was like, and the priest was like, I didn't know that you did that music, and he was like, that wasn't me, that was
Yeah.
Mozart.
That was Mozart. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Which now important historical
I don't know
note
if
here.
anyone mentioned
So,
that. Yeah.
well, important historical note. So we mentioned a little bit before that that the film plays kind of fast and loose with some aspects of history, and it does it for very deliberate effect. But one of the things is so in their lifetimes, Salieri was more popular and more respected than Mozart was. And it took a couple more years for Mozart's music to really catch on in the popular consciousness. And largely it was because of rumors that were pretty salacious for the time and to this day that, Salieri was somehow jealous of Mozart and wanted to murder him, which were not true. Not only that, but Salieri says in here, in return, I give you my chastity, my industry, my deepest humility, all
Yeah.
that. But Salieri was definitely not chaste because he was married, and I can't remember if he did or didn't have extramarital affairs, but he was for sure married. And I think he had even
Mhm.
children, so he was
Yeah,
most
he had a
definitely not
kid. Yeah.
chaste. Yeah, he was most definitely not chaste, but
Mhm.
he, I get why because they're setting up that dichotomy. But it's important to note that that Salieri
Mhm.
was actually more popular than
Mhm.
Mozart in his time. But as I said in the chat, that
Because
it's more about the spirit of Salieri through time versus the spirit of Mozart through time, how they've
Yeah.
endured
Well,
or
yeah.
not.
I thought that actually came across in the movie pretty well. I
Oh yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you could see in the times when they would have him doing his pieces and the public was much more into it, but whenever Mozart's operas were there, the audiences would act quite dubious to them, with the exception of that vaudeville piece at the end, which you know, too little, too late, I guess.
Now, what's funny about that vaudeville bit there is that Mozart, in that moment, he kind of reminded me a little of Shakespeare in the sense that Shakespeare, he and his players, the theater was not really a high class joint, shall we say. It was full of like prostitutes and people that were drunk, and it was like,
Mhm.
a very not good place to be across the River Thames, but you also had like a bunch of, people that were rowdy, but also that's where the fun was. And but that's also where the great beauty was, because he made, the greatest
Mhm.
plays that anyone has ever written
And
there. And so then with Mozart there, he shows that he's a man of the people, and he gets something that the establishment doesn't get. That music, it lives on in the heart of people, and even if it's in kind of an absurdist way, in a parody way, that you saw on the stage there, but it's like it still is resonating with people.
he,
Yeah,
of course,
sadly,
he fully appreciated that
mhm,
parody of his own piece, which was kind of
yeah,
nice that he was able to do that. Those scenes definitely put me. I was thinking like this would be like the exact sort of audience that would probably be lining up to watch a Midsummer Night's Dream or something like that. I mean, it
mhm,
was exactly the same sort of deal there. And then, but on the other hand, Mozart does get to play prototypical snobby critic too. Like
Hmm.
one of my favorite bits of dialogue involving him directly is after he attends one of Salieri's performances, and they're talking about like,
yeah,
Mozart, it was good of you to come. Well, how could I not? Did my work please you? I never knew that music like that was possible. And he's like, you flatter me. No, no, one hears such sounds, and what can one say but Salieri?
Salieri. I know it's such a
Well,
That's like,
such a backhanded compliment, but well, but then
so
the
when
most
you,
so the most telling part of the whole thing when it comes to his dialogue is,
right.
Herr Mozart, you are not the only composer in Vienna. No, but I'm the best. It's like it's true, but then the other guy
Yeah,
says, yeah, a little humility would serve you better, and it's
right. And
absolutely true.
there's another part where they're talking about the people getting that, like it was a Tudor post or something, and then he's like, that guy's utterly mediocre or something like that. And
A total
Salieri's like,
mediocrity.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, but Salieri's like, no, he has not yet achieved mediocrity.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's
I
a
love
harsh
that.
statement.
and one of the things though to keep in mind, especially at that scene where he's
Hmm.
talking about him, uh,
Right.
a lot of it, of course, you get the scene where he's making fun of Salieri's stuff, but
Hmm.
that time, truly, I mean, before a little earlier on, he was more of a what do they call it? He would have been more upfront about not liking it, but
Hmm.
because he considered Salieri actually a close friend,
Yeah.
as far even though it was anything but the case, or one of his few friends, really,
Hmm.
he didn't want to openly mock or upset him, so he was being creative
Hmm.
in how he was like, yeah, yeah, that definitely, yeah, definitely
Right.
something there, instead of outright
Yeah.
just saying it's bad. He might not have said that. He might have actually gone out and said meh
Right.
and left had they not
And
had that
he never
And
relationship.
even the other,
he never outright said that Salieri's work was ever bad, because I mean he even
right.
liked it enough to do a variation on one of his pieces, a funny little tune, but it
Mhm.
yielded some good things. So that's like, it's not
Yes.
even saying it's bad. It's just,
Right.
it's like, it's
Or
obviously not up
there
to
was that
his
scene in the there was the
but it's
scene in that public house where he was playing all these different tunes for the crowd, and he kept mocking all these other composers they were putting forward, and then Salieri secretly is in the room. He's like, "Put
Well,
Salieri," and he's like, That is a challenge.
And much like an ape or like a chimpanzee starts playing the Sonari first piece you hear from him, and of course he explodes out with a fart.
Now, one thing about that, I think that was the scene where they stood him up like a keg stand and he played the piano backwards. One thing that's very important to note is that both Tom Hulce and F. Murray Abraham studied intensively for these roles. And going into it, neither of them played the piano. So they did a really good job with that aspect of the acting. Because from what I read, that was Hulse playing the piano upside down like that. And that's
Apparently,
pretty impressive.
Even though, well, like you said, even though they hadn't played piano before, apparently the teachers, especially for Tom Hulce, apparently they said, he doesn't play one wrong key, not even when he's playing backwards, which is pretty remarkable. But the keyboards were not sounded, so they weren't. It's not like they learned to play piano overnight. They just had to hit the right keys. But interesting.
But that's
again,
still
historical
something.
note. We've talked about some of the ways in which the film. It is. We've talked about some of the ways that the film differs from history. One way that a surprising connection point to real history is that Mozart, he had kind of a dirty sense of humor. So the part where he farts and everything, that's actually true to life because so the tune that we in English know as Twinkle Little Star, apparently the original Mozart's lyrics that he wrote for that, like really super raunchy for their time.
Like Tinkle Tinkle.
And then he apparently liked to write really dirty poems that were like all about farting in people's faces and stuff like that. I'm not joking. You can look this up.
I was going to say we need to make flatulence elitist again.
Yes, we do. But the point being that the real Mozart would have been very proud of that because he apparently loved really, really vulgar humor and would set like beautiful pieces of like some of his most beautiful pieces of music could be about like the dirtiest things, which I expect. I admire him even more.
So that puts an interesting thought.
Shakespeare hid dick jokes in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, he did. I was just going to say that puts an interesting thought in mind, though, with the Animal House connection. Like, if he had been alive in the 70s and scored, he probably would have happily scored a film like that. That's a thought.
All right.
But anyway.
Yes, indeed.
Anyways, that's fun. We, of course, we find out that this old man is actually an old but used to be renowned court composer named Antonio Salinari, and he is now a very bitter old man. There's nothing he would like to talk about more about his misery. How his music used to be across the world, and now it's all but forgotten. Nobody seems to know anything. And of course, he tells that to the priest. He plays two musical pieces. The priest doesn't understand.
Real quick. Is anyone else having audio issues?
I am.
Because everyone's fading in and out on my end.
Me too.
Okay.
I haven't really heard.
Yeah,
it's been pretty good to me.
I wonder if it might be my headphones. I'll try. Hook them up. Yeah. So I may be gone for a minute while I'm trying to get them up. Yeah.
Anyways, Salinari, of course, talks about talking about his descent into darkness, into obscurity. But he does this after playing a couple pieces that the priest doesn't recognize. What about this one? He says dun 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 dun. And of course, the priest happily talks, starts humming out the song and a little piece of song bite. And said, "Oh yes, I know that. Is that yours?" And of course, Salinari says, "No, it isn't. Instead, it's his nemesis." Now he starts talking about, he starts seeing a flashback to his youth. We're not going to talk too much about it because I think we already talked about it quite sufficiently. He wished to God that he wanted to be a great composer, that he would be immortal. People listen to his music. And of course, it flashes again to his later adulthood when he's actually has become a court composer to the emperor. What's his name? There's some emperor guy.
Joseph II, I believe it
Emperor
was.
Joseph II.
Yeah, and he's really excited because Mozart, a person that he has admired since his earlier childhood, that this kid could play music at 4. He composed music. I mean, while Antonio's playing around with sticks and balls and stuff, Mozart is playing real music, blindfolded, violins, piano music, composing it. And of course, he wants to meet this particular young man. He said, "Who's going to be this young man? A giant pillar of what he has built up to be." Of course, to its chagrin, it turns out that Mozart is anything but that up front. Of course, leads into the main issue between Salinari and Mozart. His first inkling that he has seen a monster in what he thought would be his salvation, his savior, his mentor, his everything.
I did find it funny that it really does play up Salieri's weakness for sweets, because he ends up meeting
Oh yeah.
he ends up meeting Mozart, observing a lot of the improper behavior when Salieri sees this chocolate
Yeah.
basic thing going forward, and he's like, "Ooh," and has to follow that. And
Yeah.
that to me, I thought was a great little introduction to that as well. We all have our flaws, and in a way that makes them more human in a lot of ways.
I like that Salieri's Sweet Tooth is sort of like a thematic substitute for sex, because movie version Salieri is chaste, and of course real life Salieri is not. But I almost like to think that that's like the next best thing for him, because again, talking to Constanza, what is he eating? Nipples of Venus, so there's a thematic connection there. Which interesting again. Well, meeting Mozart there in that scene. Interesting bit from the behind the scenes. So he asks himself, which one could he be? Because did that kind of greatness show on the face? Apparently, in the behind the scenes, one of the key points that they brought up was that if you look at portraits of Mozart from the period, not one looks just like the other, which is kind of like what we have with Shakespeare, actually. Not one looks just like the other. So what they theorized was that he must have had a very nondescript face, and such that you wouldn't necessarily pick him out from the crowd. That's part of why I think Tom Hulce was cast, but also part of why he does so well, because he is kind of a smaller guy. He's a good looking guy, but he's not like classical leading man type. He's not he doesn't like command the room. He has to be kind of loud and obnoxious to get any kind of attention, because otherwise you would never pick him out. But he also carries himself like he is something special, because he's Mozart.
Okay. Was any more additional thoughts about this particular scene?
Nothing.
No, we're good to go. Anyways, as we continue on, Solinari kind of like we kind of looking more to what Mozart was doing at the time. He was of course trying to kind of like get money. I would say try to make a life. He already had Constanza, I think her name was. I don't think I'm pronouncing her name right. they already started a relationship, but he was trying to become famous, and his music was becoming famous, but he was kind of like poor. So we find himself in the presence of of this archbishop guy, and of course this kind of runs into what Solinari was looking for. After the incident with the escapade of Constanze and Mozart in the back room, suddenly this music starts playing, right? So Mozart, he's like a man possessed after that point. He drops everything he was doing at the time, and he runs over to start conducting his music piece. And of course, Solinari he's just flabbergasted, right? He stands back. So this is the guy that I was watching in the back room playing on the dirt on the floor. This is the guy that's playing this music over here. What the heck is going on? What has God done to me as he left me? It's an amazing scene because now Solinari has found a reason to hate something, and of course becomes more and more an obsession with Solinari as he finds out that he is not quite. He wishes he has the talent, which he obviously he is very talented, but he's not the best, and he's seeing what he perceives as somebody as the best. So it's interesting to see this happening right in front of our eyes, because this particular movie is a kind of a piece where I kind of see how the surface flows like water. This moves along, and you see as time goes on, all these events start. This flows across float across my screen. So as we go past this scene, we start talking more and more about what Solinari wants to do, which is, of course, uh, he wants to like, I'm going to say destroy Mozart. It kind of comes out. He says, "Oh well."
Destroy.
It really launches to the main part of the movie. The combination of Mozart playing great pieces, gaining attention, while Solinari is trying to figure out how to take him down. Does anybody have any kind of observations about how this particular terrible situation between Solinari and Mozart has become a big monster?
Well,
Heck of a first impression.
Here's here's an interesting observation there. So I referenced that I felt like he ought to have played Victor Frankenstein. One of the things, besides the story structure, another reason why I say that is because he refers to Mozart as the creature, which is how Victor Frankenstein refers to his own monster, which I think is an interesting tie there. But I think the evolution of his psyche, again, of Salieri's hatred for Mozart, I think is played beautifully because it proceeds just at the right pacing where you could believe that someone like that, could get to that place mentally, and that he would be that driven and obsessed to destroy the person that he believes to be God's gift to mankind in terms of music. And he's you understand his reasoning, though. That's one of the things my screenwriting professor told me was give your villains good arguments. And in this case, he's the protagonist, but he's also not necessarily a great guy in I would call him the villain of the piece, even though again he is the main character. But he you understand his reasoning because he did put in the work. He did come from obscurity and is seemingly blessed by God because he's at the right hand of the emperor, but and yet he's not destined for immortality musically. So you understand why he is that way, and then his drive is to destroy that which God seemingly put on earth. And it's like you I don't know, it's like I understand where he's coming from. And again, the lengths to which he goes, like, it's not even like it's all that elaborate first off. At first he's just doing very subtle, like just putting himself very subtly in Mozart's way without it ever coming back to him, which, people do that in real life all the time, and it's not necessarily evil,
Hmm.
petty. But then once he starts to think about a murder, then it's like, well, then he's starting to cross the line. But even then, it's mostly very subtle, and it's mostly like he's just driving. He's being an agent of Mozart's own really, it's a self-destruction, because Mozart
Right.
didn't really need all that much pushing to get where he got. It was more so that his own demons were coming back to haunt him, and that all he did was maybe give him a few nudges here and there.
Right.
But it's like I totally get
Well,
his feelings.
he gives him a pretty big nudge there at the end, where he basically gets him to work through the night, even though he's feverish and just, he definitely pushes in a significant way there. But
Oh yeah,
you're right. It's like, and the modern equivalent of this, of course, is the people who pretty literally work themselves to death for, just because they just work too hard. You do see that happen even today. So that was, I thought it was an interesting way for him to proceed with that.
It happens so often in Japan. They have a word for it. I just don't remember what it is.
it's Karoshi.
Oh, Mo, I didn't see you sneak into the room.
Hey, baby.
Yeah, getting into backstab range.
It's the word is Karoshi.
Mhm.
There you go. Yeah. It's a common problem over there.
Mhm.
It is. Well, and again, talking about the Michael Jackson connection, Michael Jackson also died before his time, so to speak. That one we do have a clear cause and effect, but it also was preceded by personal struggles and personal stresses that resulted in poor health, and
Mhm.
led to circumstances that were not normal. Which again, the circumstances for the real Mozart are believed to have been ill health and personal stresses and probably drinking too much, but they're not as clear.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going forward, we as the movie goes forward, of course we see Mozart's first, if I remember correctly, Mozart's first opera for us. I think it was the Pirates of Penzance or Penzance, something like the Pirates of Penzance, and we have really great dance routine, music.
No,
Of
it's
course,
the first opera of
Yeah.
his that we see.
Now, the Pirates of Penzance would be Gilbert and Sullivan, wouldn't it? I think.
Yeah, that I don't know where you're getting that from. No, but it's from
The Turkish one.
the Turkish
But the Turkish one. There we go.
the abduction from the
Yeah.
the abduction from the Seraglio.
Though since Mo is here, did you have a first
Yeah.
impression of the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I just got to be real. I could not get into this. It was very much because of my mood at the time. I tried, ended up falling asleep. Fantastic fucking wigs, though. I'll say that much. It was everything that I hoped that it was going to be, where that was concerned. I don't know. What's that?
Was this your first time trying to watch it?
Yeah, indeed. And I was a bit whiskey drunk, so I just found myself the whole time like wishing vampires would show up and start killing everybody or something. And it just
Actually,
the wigs were great though.
I mean,
Interesting connection. One of the lords of the court was apparently the son of the individual who was Stoker's inspiration for Abraham Van Helsing.
There you
So you do have a vampire connection there.
Sadly lacking in the vampire department, but like I said, my mood at the time was definitely not suitable for enjoying this. I don't think so. I could tell it's something I would like if I sat down with it in a different state.
Yeah.
All right.
That's fair, I suppose.
Quite the investment of time, so yeah.
Yeah.
It is a bit long, but it seems like it probably justifies it when you're enjoying it properly,
I
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
exactly call it a party movie either, but you know,
No.
it's
I don't know. Under the wrong drugs, as later halves of it could be downright frightening.
I
yeah.
gave it
Well,
I gave it a proper attempt, but it didn't work out.
it's
Mhm.
fair, I suppose. But well, so
Yeah.
we mentioned so some of the operas that performed, at least in part, in this. We've got I don't know where you can with the Pirates of Penzance. That's several centuries later. But we've got the Abduction from the Seraglio. We've got the Marriage of Figaro is
Mhm.
performed later on. We've got Don Giovanni.
Mhm.
We have the Magic Flute. And then of course he's composing the Requiem Mass, which apparently was at least partially unfinished by the
Mhm.
time that he died.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
those are
There's
some of the
four
ones that we
movements of it.
focus on.
It was
The
very much
Lacrimosa.
unfinished.
Movements that they're
Yeah.
not,
But
Yeah.
not part of the actual composition. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's why Mozart and Antonio Salinari, they both. When I say Mozart plays this, that Arabian play. I keep on connecting to the Pirates of Penzance, and it's not. But we find out that Salinari has now galvanized his forces to take down Mozart. So Mozart now he cannot get any kind of students to study with. So he can make money. He's making money in playing through concerts, but he's not making the real money.
Right.
With the different nobles and the
Yeah.
emperor, and of course Salinari is making sure of it. He's squashing it. He's
He
squashing
can't
his
get
reputation where he goes.
he can't get patronage, which it's funny. 'Cause, that was obviously many centuries before Patreon. But
Yeah.
Patreon is the modern, but Patreon's the modern equivalent of what
Right.
used to be the norm, which was patrons, formal patrons that were
Mhm.
nobles with money that would pay artists to make great works of art, and that was in
Mhm.
place for centuries. So
Hell, dude, that makes me
Patreon is
feel a
just
lot better about the $5 I kicked towards the podcast.
oh,
now.
it's true though. I mean, it just the difference is that they weren't crowdsourced. It was all just one nobleman.
Mhm.
I need to get a
But
sweet fucking powder wig to wear when I'm listening to it now.
yeah, you do. But point
But
being,
you
like that.
or to for when you're recording your own ones,
Get some of those
Yeah.
opera binoculars. I just think they're sweet.
Well, but it's just interesting that practice is still alive and well, just in a different
Mhm.
form. And then meanwhile, no one will hire him because they all think he's some sort of a fiend, which of course he is. That's a little bit like what we were seeing with. I think Mozart might have been Me Too'd if he were alive today. It's fair to say.
Yeah.
But it's like he's getting obstructed and that's the thing. Like even if Salieri wasn't in the picture, being the puppet master, so to speak. I
Mhm.
imagine that much of the stuff that Mozart was doing, at least in the film, not sure about real life, but in
Right.
film version of Mozart, I'm sure that most of that stuff that he was doing would come back to bite him at some point or
One
another.
one thing that definitely should be mentioned, if it hasn't been, and if it was, I apologize for missing it. But the Salieri is presented as having a crush on a performer, a student of his, Caterina Cavalieri, and
Mhm.
then he looks in horror as she is the star of Mozart. I think it was Don Giovanni that she was starring
No,
in
it was the abduction
That
from the Seraglio.
abduction of whatever it was.
Was it that one? I thought it was the
Yeah,
second
that's
one.
the
It was
Okay, maybe
that's the
it was the
Turkish one.
Turkish
Yeah.
one because Don
Okay,
Giovanni
okay.
comes later.
And she was flaunting her
Okay.
Turkish dress, kind of dress.
Right.
Yeah.
But it makes it very clear. She had asked him for a role, and he's like, "It's not right for you." Yeah, you guys are right. He had said it's not right for you, and then he becomes very convinced as he's watching it that, oh, well, shoot, he's bumped
They
uglies with
slept
her,
together.
and he did not
Yeah.
he did not care
Yes.
for that at all.
Especially when
Um,
she was complaining so much about him getting married that
yeah,
she was definitely like, how dare he do that? It was, with what we had together. Even though
yeah,
she wouldn't say that exactly, because that would have implicated her fully, which she did not want. But
right.
still, yeah, it was pretty obvious.
It's clear that Mozart gets around, and we
Yeah,
never actually see him. We never see him get it on with anybody after having gotten married to Constanza. But I wouldn't be surprised if if that sort of.
If he
It seems
was a
like the
little
kind
bit of a
person who wouldn't.
Casanova.
He
Something like
definitely
that.
snuck out to those
Which
wild
in
parties, and
he did.
Yeah,
and
getting up
Well,
to a
and
bit of
the
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 old
ru- and the
extracurricular.
A little bit. And the rumor, of course, that Salieri helps to spread is that he molests girls while he's giving them lessons, which again, we never see him doing, but I wouldn't necessarily put it past him either. Although, in all fairness to Mozart, when we first meet him and he's like goofing around with Constanza and he's making her laugh and everything, it's like I was guilty of doing similar things to like my girlfriends, to try to get a laugh out of them and that sort of thing. And
Well,
oh, speaking of whom, none of us have mentioned Constanza yet, who was
no,
Mozart's real life wife, and I believe that the circumstances of her birth are correct as far as being landlady's daughter. And so Elizabeth Barrage was who played Constanza, and
hmm
she was the second choice because the original choice, Tilly, she broke her leg and they couldn't film with her. And
hmm
but Elizabeth Barrage, I think, is great for this role because she achieves that right blend of being pretty but also not like supermodel gorgeous. Like she looks like someone that you could conceivably meet on the street, which fits her station in
yeah.
life. And
She
plus,
is.
like the two of them physically, Tom Hulse and her, just
Mhm.
you look at the two of them side by side, it's like, I could see them together. They you know how like
Mhm.
certain couples, like you put them together and you're like, yeah, they fit, they
Right.
fit together.
And I like how ultimately later while they were talking to the vaudeville guy, he was like, "Oh, I see you brought your manager with you."
Yes.
Yeah.
She definitely has a more financially responsible outlook than he does. I guess
Yeah.
being the landlady's daughter, maybe she was grown up that way. But
But
she straight says
she's grounded in a way that he is not.
she
well, I
straight
mean,
says
yeah,
that he is a spendthrift, that he does
yeah.
not know the value of money. And of course, especially once they have a kid, that does put a little strain on them. But she does come off occasionally as being almost the nagging wife, but she's just so cute and charming that it's kind of hard to look at her fully that way. You kind of wonder if Mozart did, but but and
Well,
I do think
I
she
just
is.
I love. Go ahead.
What's that? Well, I was just going to
Yeah.
say I do think she is quite adorable in this movie. You're right that she's not what you would call classically beautiful, but she's definitely very, very attractive in this
Oh yeah.
film. And
Oh
and
yeah.
and again, she does have that kind of like she kind of has a cute vibe, but also there is like a steeliness there, like yeah, I may look harmless, but don't cross me vibe. She does have a little bit
Yeah.
of that going on. The only thing I'll say about her that I found a little bit unfortunate, and I noticed it probably more this time. I feel like Elizabeth Barrage, more than most members of the cast, was being pushed against the limits of her own talent. I feel like she could have been stronger in the role. I think most of the cast was almost perfect, but most of the cracks I saw were with her. I think. But
I liked what I got from her. I mean, I think that
mostly
she,
I did. Mostly I did.
Well, I
It
liked
was
the
kind of
fact
like
that,
it was kind of like with Girl Interrupted. Like there were a few times where I felt like Winona Ryder was like just a bit beyond where she should have gone. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
she was just beyond what she really had the talent to back up in a couple of scenes. Mostly she
yeah.
was great. So it's
Well,
kind of the same vibe, you know.
I love the fact that she's that right blend of like. See, if I were Mozart, like I could totally see the attraction to her because again, I thought she was looking
Mm-hmm.
and very very well endowed, I have to say. You know, she's got
Mm-hmm.
a personality that I think is appealing because she is supportive, but she's got her that she knows how to make a home. She knows
Mm-hmm.
how to be financially responsible, but she also knows she has the commitment to looking out for her husband's best interest and the best interests of the
Mm-hmm.
family. And you know, I don't know. She's got a very she's the kind of person that you're like, yeah, you know, I would want her to be, you know, the mother of my kids. You know, she has
Mm-hmm.
that right predisposition. You know, and I don't know. She just seems like someone that yeah, it's like if I were in that environment, I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed.
But the two of them
So
together, they definitely look like they would go together very
Yeah, I
well.
think they
And
yeah.
have good
for the
chemistry
most part,
together.
Oh yeah.
yeah. And for because neither of them, because then you look at the reverse because we mentioned like yeah she's very cute and adorable and but not like super gorgeous necessarily except in a few key areas. But like with Tom Hulse, like he's not like a leading man type either, even though you would never say he's like
Mm-hmm.
an ugly guy or anything like that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's just nothing that's like, you know, he there's a reason why he plays characters like he did in Animal House and in this and in the Hunchback of Notre Dame where he voiced Quasimodo. So
Mm-hmm.
he's not like your standard leading man, but he has a soulfulness and a spark, you know, that he brings to
Mm-hmm.
this and especially to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Um, you know, you can see the appeal and but so the two of them together, you're like, yeah, I get it, you know, I totally get it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So where are we at?
Well, right now, we're actually we're kind of getting into where Solinari is getting more devious in his information
Mm-hmm.
gathering, and he plants a mole, a young girl, as a maid. So I'm going to get firsthand information. What's going on in Mozart's life? What makes him tick?
Yeah.
What's his weaknesses? What can he do to widen those weaknesses? To hurt him? To stab him? To put him in the ground as fast as possible while staying completely clean? So and we also have another major event. We find out that Mozart's father is doing his best to get Mozart back get Mozart back into the good graces of the
Mm-hmm.
archbishop guy and maybe his
Mm-hmm.
other nobles to try to get him some money. Apparently, the Mozart senior knows that Mozart, his son, is maybe not doing so well after all. He
Mm-hmm.
tends to fight him on
Yeah.
the marriage of Constanze. He says, "Don't marry
Mm-hmm.
right now. Don't rock the boat." Of course, what Mozart does, he rocks the boat.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing he does, and of course, his father's up in arms about it. He says,
Mm-hmm.
"What's going on? I'm trying to prepare it, but now you're causing all my efforts to be in vain." But the one thing, yes, sir.
I do like how Constanza's mother just like beats the dude's feet just to get on stage.
Oh yes, when
Which
it was it like the first performance, I guess, after their marriage or just before they were going to
yeah,
get married,
just
and like
before.
right, and the emperor comes on stage to speak with him, and then of course she's muscled her way to the front. Stanzi, get up on stage with him. This is his fiance. Yeah, it was
Which,
kind of.
Well, when you get to see your sovereign face to face, you would want to get
Mhm.
on stage too.
Right. And it kind of, you get the impression there. And again, I think this was a good bit of acting with Jeffrey Jones. He's kind of playing like I can't believe the nerve of this woman, but on the other hand, this is kind of funny.
Oh
Yeah, he
yeah,
kind of he plays that part as you can't really
Yeah.
tell whether he's amused or offended sometimes,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
an interesting thing. It's great that he plays the part so hard to read.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's just like was
so.
said earlier,
Mhm.
genius
It's so
or idiocy.
great. Exactly. Well, it's the old. This is Spinal Tap. There's such a fine line between stupid and clever, and he plays it. He plays it like that, you know. And well, so part of it is, I'm sure, a deliberate choice, but then part of it is also, so with Jeffrey Jones, he was doing his performance for however many days of shooting, and then he eventually reached out to Milos and was like, is what I'm doing, is it okay? Do you want it this way or that way? It is like, no. Well, okay, it's just you hadn't said anything. And he's like, well, if there was anything wrong, I would have said so, So, apparently he was doing it right.
Right.
So, okay.
Right.
So, but I mean, I sympathize with, like, a lot of times I've encountered people that are very hard to read, and so he taps into that, and so he keeps you guessing all the way through, and it's a really great way to play a character like that, because it makes him more mysterious, and it's like, it's why all the people in the court, why they would be all trying to get his favor, because they don't really know which way he's gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
it's a very cool thing and dynamic.
And he does surprise them. Like, actually, a really good example of that is the scene with the Marriage of Figaro, where there's the dance at the wedding, and they're in
Yeah.
rehearsals, and everyone's like, "There's a ballet in this. The emperor has expressly forbidden ballet." And then the one guy actually tears up the music, but Mozart insists on doing rehearsals without the music. And then the emperor walks in and is like, what is this?
What
What's
is
going
this?
on? What is this?
Do you like this?
Yeah. He's like, well, can we do it with the music? And Mozart's like, yeah.
You have band ballet. He said, well, what about it? Let's have the music back in.
Yeah.
Mozart was trolling the emperor.
Yes. But, yeah,
Well, he had to
was
get
good.
under, and one thing about Figaro was that he had actually forbidden Figaro because he felt it would strike up war versus the classes. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that's
he
if you're
references
nobility,
Antoinette.
that's a big thing. You don't want happening there what was going on in France. So
No.
Yeah. Well,
it's
he
very much
references Marie
a fear.
Antoinette personally.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right.
Holy Roman Empire, as powerful as it made him look, the Holy Roman Emperor was not all that powerful a person. He was a figurehead. He had social status, but he didn't have any real power. And that was
Mostly just
he
hanging
was
out,
the-
wearing leaf hats, eating grapes while somebody fans them with those big leaves. That's the life.
That's why this is why I find that entire thing, the history, amazing, because essentially it was like a whole bunch of little countries that form Germany today decided to get together and say, "Hey, we're Rome, and this is the legit Roman emperor. Tell us different."
Yeah.
Well, Rome at the time wasn't saying anything, so yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very, very kind of weird time in their history and in the history of the kingdoms that came after the Roman Empire proper. Yeah, it's just interesting the reverberations throughout. But yeah, he references his own sister Antoinette, how she's actually terrified of her people. But Mozart, of
Well,
course, says that you know says that he's on his knees not for oppression's sake, but because he's measuring the space for his wedding bed to see if it'll fit, which of course to
Right.
him is very funny. But point being, like, he doesn't see the world in terms of politics or in terms of like those larger geopolitical issues that everyone else does. He just cares about the music.
Right.
And like, whether he can do 20 people singing at the same time.
Right. Or it was I think he said it was 20 minutes of the
20 minutes.
Yeah, 20
continued
minutes, excuse me.
continued more and more people coming in and joining the fray.
Yeah.
And I slightly disagree with Mozart on this. To me, it does become a wall of noise at that point, but it can still sound good. But
well,
it's
not to him it doesn't. I mean, like
Right.
well, it's the wall of noise versus what would be pioneered by Phil Spector, the wall of sound, which that was the whole idea. There was like all this stuff that would otherwise be cacophonous was mixed in such a way that it sounded so rich and full. So I assume he's thinking of it more in those terms, and being Mozart, of course, he could do it. But
and I will agree that if you're talking just that many people talking, that is more of a cacophony than I will concede that readily. But the one thing, we started talking about Mozart's father, and we should note Roy Dotrice plays Leopold, and he does, I think, a great job with the disapproving parent. Like, he plays that to the hilt. He is, he looks like almost comically disapproving, but not quite, there is definitely a seriousness to him, but I just think he does do a great job with that role. And definitely when he comes to Vienna, he ends up just basically crashing, just being the kind of uninvited. Well, he's kind of invited, because Mozart is thrilled to see him and terrified at the same time.
Yeah.
Stanzi's like, well, okay, you can stay, but
she says I sleep all day, and so you do,
Yeah, it's it was a tough thing between them, that's for sure. But he does add an interesting element, and this, of course, does set up the ultimate way that Salieri is eventually able to get his things.
Yeah, his father wears that costume.
Right.
And that is a wicked costume.
It's terrifying. Like, seriously, you could have like that be like your vigilante of the night costume.
Right.
And you probably scared the shit out of criminals.
I do like there's like one bit of visual humor that they do is like Leopold has his back to Mozart, and Mozart sees him, and the back of the mask on the back of his head is the exact same expression he usually wears, the sort of disapproving frown. And he turns around, and there's this big smile, and like Mozart, he does a sigh of relief, but then his father takes the mask off, and it's the exact same expression.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny.
When I love the party there with his father. It's like his father is the ultimate turd in a punch bowl that you would never want to invite to anything like that.
The ultimate buzzkill.
He really is. But it's like, no wonder why he has that frowny look on his face, but he also just seems like he's that way in general. But then, it's like what's the big scandalous thing? You've got all these women in these bustiers, and most of them are pouring out of them practically, and Elizabeth Barrage especially. And she even says in the behind the scenes, in a couple different spots where she's like, in rehearsal, I came right out of my dress, and Milos was like, keep going, and she's like, really, and then the other bit was like with the actual full costumes for the the non-rehearsals. She was like, it's every woman's fantasy to wear a costume like that for 5 minutes, because then you're in a corset, you're like practically like squeezed from the middle, like toothpaste coming out the top, and it's like, but so I find that funny as far as the fashion of the time. You've got these women who are coming out of their dresses pretty literally, but then what's the big scandal point? Show us your legs, the little like
Yeah.
petticoat or whatever
Yes.
that is underneath, and like, oh god, how scandalous is that?
Right.
And meanwhile their chests are just heaving out, like, really obviously. And of course, our dear Leopold Mozart is not amused whatsoever, and then
No.
and I love that that Wolfgang's mask is a unicorn. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, he would have fit right in at a furry convention. And he even acts like he would be at a furry convention, because he's like, I need a penalty, But again, he's got the raw talent.
Just a random thought. Was anyone else with Leopold, with Roy Dotrice, was anyone else reminded of Ian Holm? He reminded me of him, and I had to check to make sure. I was like, that's not Ian Holm, but he reminded me of him. And I was like, that. So that also kind of, because we've covered in the last couple of months, I guess, between Alien and From Hell, we've definitely covered some dark roles with him. So
Oh yeah, he's a great, also like, not so much a bit player, but more of like a supporting player. But
and
like,
Simon
he's another
Simon Callow, who plays Chicanator, I guess, the vaudevillian actor. Every time I watch this, I'm like, he looks so much like. When you see him later without makeup, the impression is diminished. But the first impression is like, he looks like Jason Lee.
Little bit.
But I've seen Simon Callow in some other stuff, and he less so as he got older. That's for sure. But.
He was in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and he was also in the film version of the Phantom of the Opera Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. He as one of the 2 opera owners, which is pretty cool.
I'm trying to remember what else. I want to say, and I'm double checking here. I want to say
he was really good in that parrot costume.
Yeah, that was pretty badass.
Right.
Well, the whole bit there with the vaudeville, it shows that clearly there's a class divide between what's considered popular theater versus the kind of theater that would be attended by nobles and by members of the royal court and everything. So there's a class divide, but then there's also the fact that music and art in general, whether it's consumed in kind of a populist parody way, like a broad comedy way, or in like a high society kind of way. Yeah, the point is, art transcends class. It transcends any of those limiting factors that society likes to put onto it. And so that's kind of it's an absurd scene, but it's absurd. It's kind of pathetic when you see Mozart so kind of degraded, but at the same time, it's also kind of empowering in its own way, just because the music, even though the lyrics are slightly different and the circumstances are way different, the music still shines through, and it's like, that says it all right there. But yeah, and it reaches the masses. It reaches people beyond their class.
Well, as time goes on in the movie, we do see the Leopold Mozart come into the family. He lets his presence known. We also have another situation with the spy maid telling Salieri what's going on with the family. So he's getting all this information, and of course Mozart gets his first true dark blow. His father dies,
Mm-hmm.
It spins, it makes them to pushes them to a tailspin of doom and gloom and alcoholism and bad living and a love hate relationship with his life what is now because he wants to escape from it. Therefore, the vaudeville, and then he has to confront it. Therefore, what brings it forth a really big, I call one of the biggest parts of the movie is where Don Giovanni is finally revealed on the screen in front of us. I was watching the movie, and suddenly I see this, the father dies, and here, of course, the sound, big boom, and so you see this wall fall apart, and you see this, this ghost come through it. I said, "What the heck is this?" So
Yeah.
my God,
Oh,
yeah,
and it is an amazing sight to behold when you see the I mean, depending on the effects and in the Vienna Opera House I saw it in, they still adapted it with a lot of great effects. Unfortunately, they had not updated the air conditioning,
Oh.
so it was probably about as hot as it was in Mozart's time.
Hey man, sweating balls in
And
a powder wig is all part of the experience, you know.
I'm sure. I am sure.
or a tuxedo in my case. But
Mm.
yeah, that was a but that whole thing with the ghost and just the effects that they threw,
Mm-hmm.
it had me enraptured for the whole. I mean, the two operas I've seen all the way through. I remember one being incredibly uncomfortable physically, but having a hard time looking away because it was such an amazing opera. And the one in Vienna, and then the one I watched in the New York Metropolitan Opera, uh, being so incredibly bored but very comfortable physically, which was
Weren't you with us when we went to the one in Roanoke
I
with
don't
Daniel?
remember. Maybe, but I don't think
I
I
would
did.
have. I would have thought you. Maybe you were in Richmond at the time because he had that rolling in opera, and we several of us
Oh
went to
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was in grad school at the time.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the only one I've been to.
Yeah, the
It was-
one that the Don Giovanni that I saw in Charlotte was nowhere near as good as what I saw here in the film. Out of all the performances, beyond just like an ancillary, someone playing on a piano here and there, as far as like an actual performance in the story, the Don Giovanni sequence is probably the best. Because the visuals match the music so powerfully and at a critical juncture in the story. The design of the actual ghost that confronts Don Giovanni, and then the figures with the torches and the demon that flies down after the wall is collapsed. That always gets me every time because I always forget it's coming. Because everything else leading up to it is so mesmerizing and so commanding in and of itself. I always forget that demon is coming down, and the shriek that it makes is really, I don't know, it gets to me.
yeah,
Uh,
that's basically Don Giovanni being sent to the hell.
yeah,
Basically.
exactly.
Yep.
But I
And
don't know,
yeah, that scene is just. Ugh.
it gets to me, and it's just again, and even just musically, it's a masterpiece. Obviously.
and it also makes you think like they must have. It makes you wonder how much of the effects budget for that, how much of that did Mozart have to pay, and how much was actually covered by his patrons? Because
Oh,
if
the
he
set
was
pieces. My goodness.
because if he had to pay a lot of that himself, if he did, then that would also explain why he was living in such poverty. I mean, because there clearly was a budget to that production.
There would have to be. I mean, and a
Shoot, all of the productions really, because
pretty
everything
darn
went.
good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh, expensive set piece.
Well,
I can do that."
so it's for the National Theater, and it's which again, the concept
So
of
hopefully they paid for most of that.
I would think so. Well, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying that because that's such a foreign concept to us in the United States, where there never has been a national theater, like there has been in just about every other country that descends from at least European tradition in some form. But Yeah, it's like I would assume that the court probably paid for most of that, if not all of it. But yeah, I think what you see there on the stage there, it's the visuals of it is so outstanding, and it was mesmerizing even for the people as they were making it, because again, Don Giovanni had its premiere in that theater where they shot it, which is pretty amazing. But then also apparently the guy playing Don Giovanni, he was performing so intently, and his hat had the big peacock feather, and it caught on fire. And
Oh.
the people watching it, they were so kind of into the performance as he was, that it took them a while to realize, oh wait, he's on fire. And so they did eventually put it out, but it was like, holy shit. And then meanwhile, they're in this opera house, which is all wooden, and they've got like a shitload of candles lighting the scene.
Yeah.
And so they were afraid that, oh, this thing's gonna burn down. So they were worried about that. Then meanwhile, they got an actor who's lit on fire, in some form. And so it's like, yeah, this whole place is a powder keg.
Yeah. One other thing I want to throw, well, I guess we can, this is related to these opera scenes, which is why I want to go ahead and mention it, I guess, because these are like interior scenes. I think they filmed most of them like didn't they film a couple of these at the actual Vienna Opera House? A couple or most of them?
Behind the scenes, they mentioned Prague as being like the principal
location, yes, but I wasn't sure.
Prague and Kromeritz, which is totally not the right pronunciation, but that's also in the Czech. That's also in the Czech Republic.
Right. Well, either way, interior definitely.
Yeah.
It is worth noting that this film it won 8 of the 11 Oscars it was up for. One of the ones it did not win, strangely enough, was cinematography, but it was nominated. But the cinematography is notable because apparently they used natural lighting whenever possible.
Yeah.
And the film looks pretty good for relying on ambient lighting.
I was going to say, and we wouldn't have gotten it that way had Stanley Kubrick not paved the way with Barry Lyndon, which is, of course, set around the same time, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We should be moving in that plot a little bit.
Right. Right.
We're actually at that halfway point anyway.
As we get done with
I think this is
What's up?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is also a good point. Just as a note, if you're watching the 3-hour version like me, this is a great time for an intermission because the story goes from one section to the other right around his father's death. It goes from the lighthearted setup to the extreme dark part of the rest of the movie.
I have the old school DVD edition that it's a flipper, and you do have to flip it to continue the film. And I think this was the dividing point, like just after this, or not too far after, because it really, once Salieri, he gets the idea, like
he sees a way in.
He sees the way forward, yes, and that kind of that inspiration, if you will, is kind of kicks the second half into high gear. So yeah, it is a good natural dividing point.
Salieri gets an idea. It calls a deep-seating piece of darkness. He's going to make Mozart self-destruct, and how he's going to do it? He's going to summon a ghost of his father, like he did with the old commander, the commander from Don Giovanni, and he told Mozart that we want you to make a requiem, a mass for the dead. And we want to make this, and we want to commission you with this, with bags of silver. Of course, Mozart was. I think he was in turn. horrified by it, but he had to do it because he was in desperate financial woes at this time. He was sick.
Right.
He was not eating right. Costanza had, I think she was either to be removed soon or she was already removed from his household. He was in dire straits, so he decided to, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. And the more he
Right.
did this requiem, the closer to death he came. So it was very interesting how the story has become completely dark. It's like watching, a photograph negative. It just goes on and on as Solinari gloats and says he watching his the creature fall apart, and maybe. And he thought if maybe as time goes on, he might get something out of it, even more out of it, with that piece of music as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, the
yeah,
epiphany, the speech he gives about his epiphany, is where he's watching Don Giovanni. He's saying, "Only I understood that the horrifying apparition was Leopold, raised from the dead. He had actually summoned up his own father to accuse his son before all the world." And then he says, "I began to see a way, a terrible way, I could finally triumph over God." And then later he's got the part where he's like, "My plan was so simple. It terrified me. First, I must get the death mask, and then I must achieve his death."
Yeah.
And he was planning to basically steal credit for the Requiem, to basically say, Requiem Mass for Wolfgang Mozart, composed by his devoted friend, Antonio Salieri. Salieri has been touched by God at last, and God is forced to listen, powerless to stop it.
I, for once, in the end, laughing at him.
And then and then he just switches gears. He's like, the only thing that worried me was the actual killing. How does one do that? How does one kill a man? It's one thing to dream about it. Very different when you have to do it with your own hands. And he says
the look
that,
on the priest's face.
Yes.
Well, he has such conviction when he's talking about the first part, and then the actual doing of it, he's like, "Ooh, icky." I have to get my hands dirty.
Well, imagine being the Protestant or Catholic priest that is just now listened to this entire madness.
I know,
right?
And everything that he stands for and believes has just been shunned like all over the place.
Oh, totally.
Well, one thing I had meant to mention at some point, and I'll just go ahead and do it because it seems like a good place. One of the reasons I love Salieri's performance in those scenes, or Abraham's performance in those scenes, is Salieri basically is. Dane, you said earlier there's a fine line between was it cleverness and stupidity?
Stupid and clever, yeah.
Stupid, but here it's similar. It's like he is walking a very, very fine line between devout piety and utter blasphemy. It's like he's absolutely doing both at the same time, and the priest doesn't know what to make of it.
Well, it's just like I mentioned Tom Hulce in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Just like Frollo there, like he is a man of God who believes he's doing what's right, even though what he's doing is totally against what his understanding of God's will should entail. But the difference is Salieri even kind of admits to himself. That's when the madness formed into me of a man splitting in half. Because it's like, as much as he wants to see Mozart destroyed, it's also tearing him apart because he knows that he is endowed by that great spark of divine inspiration. So it is splitting him in half, but but again, like the whole speech he gives there, like as far as favorite scenes, it's either that or the part where Mozart rewrites Salieri's March. Like those are like the two standout moments, and particularly because of just how much conviction he has in his performances. Like that moment alone, it's like, oh yeah, that's why F. Murray Abraham won Best Actor, because he I don't know, I have yet to see a performance quite like that, with that much passion and that much like diabolical conviction, but also like you understand him. You understand that he feels like he's winning out against these unfair circumstances of his existence. But as we find out, even after he has seemingly gotten what he has wanted, it's a hollow victory to say the least. And even then, can it really even be called a victory? Because, like he even said, God would rather take away his own creation than to let Salieri have just an ounce of his talent, of his glory. And so it's like it's a hollow victory for sure. But yeah, that moment, it's like he sees the way, and so he's gonna take it.
I think he said 32 years of watching myself become extinct or something like that.
Yeah. Hearing my music grow fainter.
Right.
Yeah, that's his punishment.
As Mozart is of course now is commissioned to do this Requiem. He's also has to do another work for some other guy, some brightly colored guy, costume dude, and between that other work and the Requiem is literally killing Mozart. It's literally
the magic word.
He has no more strength to live, and of course, good old when Mozart is at his worst, his weakest, Salieri kind of whispers in and says, "Oh, some things are going bad for you." And of course, Mozart says, "Yeah, it sure sucks being me." Because I got to do all this stuff, and I can't get this one work done by myself. And of course, Salieri says, "Hey, how about if I help you?
Yeah,
take care of the Requiem. What if I can help you?" Of course, Mozart says, "Oh, this is really great. You see Salieri as a friend. He's just there to help him out. He's there to help him to his own to Mozart's work, so he can publish the work under his own name, so he can get more defeat God finally, and finally get the recognition he thought he deserved in the first place." And he decides to stay the night and compose with Mozart until morning happens. Of course,
well, that whole scene with them working together, I love that scene because it's funny because on paper, and Peter Schaffer even admitted it, that on paper it would be like the least cinematic thing imaginable, just watching two people talk about composing music with seemingly nothing else to it. Like he's like, yeah, on paper this makes no sense whatsoever why you'd have this in here, except that in fact, and this is a testament to how good the actors are. In fact, there's a lot that's being communicated in that scene because so Mozart is many steps ahead of Salieri. And in fact, Mozart's mind is many steps ahead of Mozart's mouth, his ability to communicate his thoughts. So he's having to get ahead of, he's having to communicate all of these thoughts that are coming at him all at once while he's in this feverish ecstasy in a way. And then Salieri's trying to keep up. So it shows their thought processes and just how fast Mozart thinks, but also the fact that in this moment where Salieri seemingly has Mozart right where he wants him, and yet you really get the sense that this is like the first time that they've ever really connected as colleagues.
Because they are collaborating. They are actually collaborating. And earlier there was an important scene that we kind of missed, which is the part where after Mozart flat out refused to submit his work as basically an audition, Stanzi comes to Salieri with a portfolio of his work.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'll look at them later," tries to give her the brush off. And she's like, "I can't leave those. Those are originals." And then he's like, "Originals?" He gets them out, he's looking at them, and he is absolutely astonished because there are no corrections, no mistakes. And basically it's established that Mozart was basically writing what was already composed
in his head.
As
and
if
so
he's
taking dictation.
Right.
Well,
and so essentially
and plus,
when the shoe's on the other foot and Salieri has to take dictation, he just can't really keep up with it.
Yeah.
And one thing I found amusing and interesting was that in order to help him with that sense of frustration and confusion, apparently Tom Hulce was intentionally skipping and dropping lines
Yes, he
so that
was.
Salieri wouldn't know what he kept losing his footing because he was like, wait, that's not the script.
Yeah, yeah, he did that on
Yeah.
purpose. Well, so what
Yeah.
happened also was that there's a section that they recorded that with 2 cameras so that they could get their real interaction in the moment, which is a great idea. But there's a moment where Mozart just kind of stares off into space for a little bit, and you know, he's like, "Yes, Concertatus," you know, it's trying to get him to get going. And it takes him a little while to get started. What actually happened there was Tom Hulce actually forgot his lines, and but then it worked so well that they kept it. But then also, but also he also deliberately left out pieces of information that he knew that he needed to get to the next place, so that it would look like Salieri was having to keep up and wasn't doing a great job of it, which is brilliant. You know, that makes total sense. But
Sorry,
the
Dave.
go ahead.
I know you were trying to say something, Dave, and I feel like I kind of ran over it. Sorry.
Well, one of the things that I was going to add was the fact that not only did he have it in his head, but there were no note. This was a first draft.
Yeah.
Original.
First and only drafts.
And there were no notations or corrections or anything like that. So
well, it's like he said to the guy with the vaudeville case afterwards. You know, oh, it's all done. It's like, but where is it?
It's all here in my noodle.
And like, yeah, of course, he's like, it doesn't do me any good up there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's and you have to. So as far as quotes, and oh my God, there's so many great quotes in this, but the one that probably sticks out the most is from when he's looking at the music and he notices no corrections. But my favorite quote is probably, "I was staring through the cage of those meticulous ink strokes at an absolute beauty." And it's like, oh, that's beautiful. But then you see him in the scene later where he's taking that dictation, and I'm sure, like, he's following along. He can see the brilliance unfolding before him. He's just trying to keep up with just how rapidly it's coming out of this great fountain of music, you know.
And it does show that Salieri himself would have had to have had some pretty solid musical talent and grounding to be able to understand what was being communicated, because I admit, as someone who has some grounding but not anywhere on that level, a lot of that is like, how does he know? How do they know what they're talking about?
Oh yeah.
And the musical cues that they use. This is one thing you said about it looks on paper different than it looks on screen. The way they use the musical cues in those scenes really do help the audience to follow along and to get more out of the scene than they would have otherwise.
Oh yeah, and you hear each piece getting added to the layer. You hear the tenors, you hear it's how you build a song, you know. And I think composers of all stripes, or even in whatever genre, not even classical, but just in every stripe, that's how you do it. You have to do it piece by piece, and then eventually you got the whole thing. And but again, Salieri in real life was not, again, he was well known. He was, you know, well respected, and he obviously had the pedigree, but it was just, you know, his music just kind of went out of fashion. And if anything, it was because of Peter Shaffer's play and the film that his music kind of got rediscovered. And so in many ways, this film helped to kind of, it's like it uses a lot of those rumors and salacious things kind of for its own dramatic advantage, but at the same time, Salieri's name and his music is getting out there more than it had been for the last century or two. But yeah, he obviously had talent of his own, and yet it is Mozart that people know even if they're not classical music enthusiasts.
Yeah.
But so they get as far as they can with the Requiem Mass before his spirit can no longer take it anymore, and he
Leaves.
dies. Well, but so a key scene
Well,
that
not before.
apparently
Not
sorry.
before he gets a kind of a goodbye with the wife, and
And
she comes back
there
and tries. She comes
to
back and angrily tries to kick Salieri out.
choose him out pretty good. Which
Yeah.
now one key scene that apparently was not in the theatrical cut but was in the director's cut was where he makes it seem like he wants to sleep with her in order to get him the post, and so she disrobes, and then he rings the bell and is like, "Show this woman out," which in many ways is even more embarrassing than if they
Oh,
had
you could
actually
see it.
slept together.
That helps explain why she was so angry at him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a key. It's a key scene that I can understand. So some people that saw the theatrical cut, they were like, "It's perfect the way it is. There's no need to change it." But with that scene there, it helps explain more why she's so angry with him, because she has kind of a bad history with him anyway. And because if you don't have that scene there, then it's like, well, why is she so mad at him?
And anyone else who only has seen the regular cut can tell me if I'm wrong here. I feel like it's still pretty clear that she felt that he was being overworked, that he really was not, and she didn't know that Salieri was secretly the one funding the Requiem.
Yeah.
So for all she knew, he was just putting more work on his plate. And, so that was kind of the way I always read it. And it works, but the way you describe it, it works more.
Well, they have an added history that's underneath all of that she's trying to put in on the back burner, even though it's clearly there.
But as far as him adding to Mozart's workload, one part of that whole scene that has to be mentioned is the part where Mozart really is about to give up the ghost. He is just out of it. But he tries to play it off. He's like, well, why don't you rest for a bit? And Salieri's just like, well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm good. We can keep going.
Well, but again, I love the way that he plays that, though, because at that moment when they're working together, you really feel like he's not saying it to obviously manipulate him. You get the sense that he's really sincere. He's like, yeah, keep going. I want to finish this thing. And I'm like, well, that's what makes that scene work so well, because you get, even though everything is going according to his plan, in that moment, you really feel like, again, this is the first time that they have ever really connected as human beings and as collaborators. And it's like only then, at that moment of death, do they have that connection, even though it's all going according to his insidious plan. And it's a great irony there, because then when he finally does die, then he's not able to enjoy the fruits of his labors. He's just as sorrowful as the rest of Vienna and the world for this great talent having left this world so prematurely.
Yeah. And it's also another tragedy happens because Mozart couldn't afford a proper grandious's burial. He was just taken away by some nondescript people and dumped somewhere.
In a mass grave. No.
Awesome.
Very sad.
Yeah.
You know what would have been even more awesome is if when he died, it's all solemn, right? There's maybe like a funeral scene, and then he just sits up in the casket and bares his fangs, and then it just goes black and it says, "Coming next summer, Nosferatu." And maybe the bottom of the F and the R make like vampire fangs in the logo. That'd be sick.
That happens in the other director's cut.
Go and make that movie there, Mo.
Hey, Mo, they are. I have heard that they are remaking Nosferatu, so maybe they'll get Tom Hulsey to play one of the main. Maybe he'll play Van Helsing in this one.
That'd be cool.
As long as it's powder wigs, I'm down.
And it's my boy Robert Eggers of The Witch and The Lighthouse doing it, and I'm like, yes.
Wait, it's the dude doing The Lighthouse? Oh wow! And Anya Taylor-Joy's in it, right?
Yes. Perfect
Okay,
choice.
this could be good. This could be good.
Yes, it will.
Ah,
But yeah, so he gets buried in a mass grave, which is a very sad sight.
yeah.
But again, hollow victory for Salieri because he's punished to
Mhm.
realize that his music is growing fainter. He's becoming more obscured. He has to live with the fact that Mozart's name continues to be celebrated throughout the
Mhm.
ages, and he is the patron saint of mediocrities.
Yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
like, to all mediocrities, I absolve you.
Right.
Yeah, I
Well,
love that
actually,
he becomes like this mad religious figure in his own
yeah.
version of things.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and say probably one of my favorite moments in the whole film, and one of my favorite quotes, is when they're getting ready to wheel him out of the room, and he puts his hand on the father's shoulder, and he's like, "I will speak for you, Father. I speak for all mediocrities in the world. I am their champion. I am their patron saint." And then, yeah, they have the thing of him absolving. But talk about backhanded compliments. Like, I will speak for you. I speak for all mediocrities.
Oh, I
It's like,
know.
what? Yeah. And but it's kind of like I just love that whole the obsession with mediocrity and rising above it. That both Salieri and Mozart show is kind of like I said, it's one of the through lines in this, but it is one that I definitely connect with to a degree. Like I don't want to say I'm super connected to Salieri, not by any means, but I understand where dude's coming from. Let's put it that way.
Well, anybody that's ever worked
Very
hard at
amusing
something
ending.
or
Yeah.
felt anybody that's ever worked hard at something, or they
Right.
see someone else getting all the breaks and everything.
Mhm.
I think we've all felt that way. But then,
Mhm.
but what's so different though about that is that we've all seen plenty of people who are not talented, who still get the breaks and everything because
Mhm.
they know the right people and all that stuff, which that's annoying in its own right, but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's who you know, whatever. It hurts even more when it's someone who is just naturally talented and naturally can do it so well, and you have to work at it really hard, which you know that's a pretty rare class right there. But
Mhm.
for me, I feel that way more so when I look at like the milestones that certain people have achieved at earlier ages than I have,
Mhm.
and that's what gets to me. But I have to also step back and say, well, partially it's who they know, what their life story is, what was or wasn't holding them back. Everybody's story is different, and there are lots of ways to get to where you want to go. Yeah, that's kind of what I understand. But
Yeah.
yeah, the point being, like, his feeling in life is rooted in very real and understandable emotions. I think
Mhm.
everybody that works hard at something and wants to do well, they can probably sympathize.
Mhm.
But again,
I'm just
Mozart,
gonna sleep my way to the top. That's my plan.
well, Mozart, the difference there's only one Mozart in the world, and only ever will be one. But again, like, even then, Beethoven, like, kind of similar with a stern father and everything, but his story's not exactly the same. He had his own challenges. He had his own hurdles to go through, and
Mhm.
everybody great that you admire, they have challenges that are unique to them, and they achieve greatness at whatever time it seizes them, or whenever they finally reach that point. So
Mhm.
everybody's story is different, but there will only ever be one Mozart.
Mhm.
But we all
Indeed.
have that. We all have his music, and it will last forever.
Well,
Mhm.
I think that we've come to the end of our discussion with the Amadeus. I think it might be wise to talk about our favorite scenes in the movie, or perhaps the music you like the most. What do you
Mm.
advise SeptumSin?
Well, let me
Mhm.
think. So it's like
Oh, so
favorite scene would either be where he's talking about what we mentioned, and God forced to listen, all that stuff. It'd either be that or like, for me, the scene that kind of is the movie in a nutshell is the when Emperor Joseph meets Mozart for the first time and they play the March of Welcome, that Salieri composed, because Mozart, he remembers it from one hearing only. He speeds up the tempo, but he plays it perfectly. But then he's like, the rest is just the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
That doesn't really work, does it? Shouldn't it have? Did you try? Should it be a bit more or this? Yes. You like it? How about that? You know, and he ends up turning it into a Mozart piece, you know, totally, because like, and it sounds a million times better. Not that the other one was bad, but it's just he gave it such life and such energy, and everything flows exactly the way that a Mozart piece would flow. And Mozart pieces are so distinct. Because the notes connect in such a way that it's like, oh, naturally that would follow, you know, and they're very catchy and very pleasant to hear, but they're so high energy, you know, and so then he takes it and turns it into something totally greater than what it like. It foreshadows, he foreshadowed it, but a funny little tune, but it yielded some great things. And so that was foreshadowed, and then boom, there he goes and does it again.
Not only that, he subtly disses the emperor in that, because the emperor insisted on playing the piece as he entered, and he's got the music right in front of him, and he's kind of noodling through it and doing a serviceable job. And then Mozart comes down and just playing from ear and from memory, just plays circles around the emperor on there.
Oh, totally. But playing circles around Salieri too.
Right.
Like the rest is just the same, isn't it? Which I think is great. But so in terms of the actual piece, just in and of itself, I think it'd be. Well, I liked the piece that we heard from the abduction of the Seraglio. That was great, as well as Don Giovanni, the Commandantore scene, and then the Dies Irae from the Requiem Mass. I think those are all some of the outstanding pieces. But it's Mozart; you can't go wrong no matter which one you pick. But then, of course, the piece that closes us out on the end credits, the Piano Concerto Number 20 in D minor. That's just the perfect ending theme there.
Okay, SeptumSin, what was your favorite scene?
Well, I mean, scene definitely the end where he is like, I am the champion of mediocrity. He just goes through the asylum and just is like, you know, you are, you know, this and blessed you this and this. He goes around like the Pope, basically being wheeled out for his sweet buns. And I don't know, I just that amuses me to a great end. But also any scene showing off that creepy costume that his father had worn, be it Salieri or his father wearing it. It's just, it adds such a level of darkness and shadow to the thing. It was just kind of cool.
It really does, and like we said before, the poster, one of the best posters ever.
Okay, Forrest, what was your favorite scene?
All right, I'm not gonna. All right, so I'm gonna strip say, watching Mozart rip ass. It's a moment that I was not expecting at all. And it's a thing, like there was a time in history where flatulence and a formal event was considered acceptable behavior.
Well, and as we mentioned before, the real man was very into that.
What was that? I'm sorry, Dan.
As we mentioned before, the real Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was very into flatulence, so it's accurate.
It almost makes me think I was born about 200 years too late.
Yeah, we need to bring that back. That's a.
I leave that up to you. I leave that up to you two to chart that path forward.
I'll start working on it.
There you go, Mo. Flatulence and powdered wigs. That's your goal.
And Vampire Mozart. Which, I mean, we did kind of get that movie, though, didn't we? It was called Interview with the Vampire.
It's a shame that he didn't compose a whole movement with just flatulence, you know. That
Yes. Oh my god.
Hey, what was your favorite scene in the Amadeus?
Me?
Yeah, you're next.
Okay. I would have. I don't know why, but the scene where Constanza is, well, it's not that he makes her. She comes of her own volition, and she basically strips, and she's very voluptuous and conscientious about herself, and it's just a very innocent scene there. And then the fact that he just rings a bell and calls the servant, and she just throws a candelabra at his ass. That's just priceless. But I would have to say the Don Giovanni scene is my favorite because that Giovanni dude is like giant, like standing there in the doorway. And to me, I know that Don Giovanni kind of plays a part in the 2004-2005 Phantom of the Opera as well. And I love that movie too. So I do like the Don Giovanni story. And I do think that one of the truths might be the fact that his father died.
You're thinking of Don Juan Triumphant in that film.
Yeah, but Don Giovanni is based on Don Juan. So it's pretty much the same darn story.
Well, look, granted, the works that are referenced in the Phantom of the Opera, those are all pastiches of popular works that would have been performed at that time.
True.
Don Juan Triumphant sounds like a badass rap name or like a porno name.
Again, Mo, I'm counting on you to make that movie.
All right, Mo, what was your favorite scene in Amadeus?
Oh man, like I said, I made the mistake of watching this in the wrong state. Jokes aside, you could tell it's a very well made movie and definitely one that deserves like proper session with me down the road. I will be revisiting it for sure. I agree with Dane, the poster's rad. I don't know, I liked the scene with the wigs, you know what I mean? Anything with wigs.
Wonderful. Why don't I
they are. Yeah.
Yeah,
I want that one and that one and that one. I'll take them all.
One wonders if Mozart took part in the Hellfire Club meetings.
Well, okay, so wigs, would that fall under makeup and hair? I think it probably does, right? Or would these old school ones be more like costume design?
Parliament wigs, yeah.
Because the movie did win. The movie did win makeup and costume design, so they must have liked the wigs too.
The Hellfire Club was in Britain and Ireland, so no, I don't think he would have.
All according to the wig party behind the film. Anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it though, man. Like I said, I definitely need to give it another go. You can tell it's a quality piece of filmmaking, and it sounds like there's some rad shit in the last part of it that had I been awake for, probably would have got me a lot more interested in it than I was at the time.
Yeah. Well, all right.
Hey,
I guess I go?
Yeah, your turn, buddy.
Okay. As I think we've established by now, most of the scenes with the older Salieri were probably some of my favorites. There were a lot of great moments in the film, and I'm not sure, honestly, which one's the best. But I do think that scene where that Brandon mentioned at the very end, where he, that the final moment with the priest followed by him giving his absolution to everyone might be my favorite. Yes. There are some really good ones. And I will admit, it's really hard for me to single out a piece of Mozart music as like, well, this is clearly the best. I do say that one movement from the Requiem is probably one of the ones that's most familiar to me. But in terms of the production, the full impact on screen, the Don Giovanni sequence may be one of the best ones there. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let's see. Okay, Dane, did you say your favorite scene already, or you want to expound upon what you said before?
Yeah, I think the probably the moment with him rewriting the March of Welcome. I think that that kind of sums up the movie in a nutshell. Even though I don't think it's like the most outstanding piece of like singular acting in the film, it just writing wise, I think it sums everything up in a single scene. But so interestingly enough, when I was really getting kind of obsessed with the film in college, I would listen to the soundtrack, pretty religiously, and that was Neville Mariner and the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields that performed the piece, performed all the music in the film. The parts that, for whatever reason, that always kind of stuck in my head were the two pieces from The Marriage of Figaro, and then obviously Don Giovanni, and then there's the I don't know if it's pronounced Zaid. It's Zaide. That piece, which we don't really hear all that much in the film, but that one always stuck with me. Just in terms of pure music, it was very beautiful. But again, with Mozart, it's like, gee whiz, where do we start? Just pick anyone out of the basket, and you've got a masterpiece. So you can't go wrong.
Okay. I guess my turn. I'll say my favorite scene by far is the bursting of the dead commanders goes through the wall on the Don Giovanni scene. It blew me away. I said, "This is really cool. I can't wait to watch it again." And I did watch it several times. It's that one scene. So that turned out to be one of the most powerful scenes that I liked a lot.
Well,
And
Mo, you should put on as your favorite. You should put the part in the vaudeville where they feed stuff to the horse and it poops them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun.
all right. Let's see. Did we talk about costumes or music?
I think
I
we
think
kind of hit it as we went along.
Covered that pretty thoroughly as we went.
Yeah, and I think of all the movies that we've covered very thoroughly in the music department, it would be this movie,
Okay.
obviously.
We could go with that. Costumes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
so
it
everybody's happy with
deserved
the
its
costumes.
wins.
All righty.
It deserved its wins in that regard.
Again, like there's everything about this movie really is A+ quality work.
Although I do have to admit, had they had use of music in film, this film would have had stiff competition from This Is Spinal Tap.
Although those were all unique. Yes. Those were all original songs, though, so they wouldn't.
Right, but again, the way that both of them really lean into the music as an integral component of the film. Yeah, and the part where Nigel composes that wonderful little piano piece. And then he's like, lick my love pump. That sounds like a Mozart moment.
Well, I mean, in terms of like set pieces too, it's hard to beat Tiny Stonehenge. I mean, come on.
Well, I know. Think about it. We have Tiny Stonehenge, and then we've got the wall collapsing here. We've got farting at the piano bench, and then we've got Lick My Love Pump. So these movies have more in common than you think.
Yeah, it sounds like this basically is just classical Spinal Tap.
Basically.
May I end this discussion with a small, corny joke?
Yes.
Okay. Well, before you end it, did you give your favorite?
Yes, it was the Don Giovanni scene with the commander coming through the wall.
Okay.
Take us away.
Go ahead, Dave.
All right. So while I was on tour in Vienna, we were walking through the Jewish cemetery, and our tour guide told us this joke. And so he was taking another group of tourists through the old Jewish cemetery, and all of a sudden they heard this god awful sound, and somebody in the crowd said, "Hey, who is that?" And the tour guide said, "Oh, that's just Mozart." And the guy's like, "Well, what the hell is he doing?" "Oh, he's just decomposing."
That's good
Sorry.
stuff.
Yes, all right.
Oh my.
Sorry.
No, that's the way to end it. All right.
Okay,
I think it's rim shot worthy, you know.
I'm sorry. I just had to.
The audience is now deaf. Or at least.
I think I just went deaf after hearing that.
It wasn't too bad. I mean, it was corny.
Well, I mean, you did rightfully.
Bad jokes, man, I love them.
You did rightfully preface it. So, if you'd have said it was a masterpiece, then I would have had harsher criticism.
All right.
Alrighty. So, why don't we start with all of our outros?
Okay.
Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Roger. I live in Florida, and I run the Amazing Collections and Company Facebook group. We specialize in wide section of collecting, including anime, manga, and figures. We want to have the biggest collectors and the best collectors in Facebook. I also have the intention of having the largest anime collection in the state of Florida, and I got the Grand Griddle ready to prove it. So thank you all for having me.
Hey, you
Definitely.
on that
Thank you
club.
for,
You better.
thanks for choosing the movie.
Dane,
You better get
why
on.
don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Dan Kyle, independent filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Before I got on this call, I actually watched Shakespeare's Shitstorm, the latest Lloyd Kaufman trauma film, and I got to see my script consultant credit rather prominently, I'm thankful to say. So I've had some credits pop up here and there on increasingly higher profile things. Just hope to keep that momentum going. And I've been busy working on a video series that I hope to get done in time for October.
Okay.
Alrighty. Why don't we go over with you, Mo? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, so I am Mosley. I run a channel called Drunken Master Studios. Our main focus lately is a series that I've been doing called Full Moon Madness, where I go back to the video store days of my youth and talk about all types of Charlie Band related projects. Got some big stuff brewing over there, sort of fan-based event that's going to be going on, as well as some unveilings that are going to be happening in the coming weeks. So be sure to go over there, check out the playlists for the series, and get all caught up so you're ready for that stuff. And other than that, just nothing. I don't do anything else lately. But it's a lot of work is going into that full moon stuff in the coming weeks, and hopefully it pays off. Hopefully a lot of you guys tune in so you can come along for the ride.
Alrighty. Forrest, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, my name is Forrest Bennett. I'm an independent film producer based in Long Island, New York. I've got one project that I was an associate producer on called Cryptids coming out soon.
Ooh.
And then also it's an anthology horror. And
Yes.
Also recently worked crew on a little movie called Victim No More, written and directed by Bobby Heckman. Also movie and comic book collector, YouTuber, and I've always got something going on.
Alrighty.
I love old Bobby Heckman. Actually, speaking of Full Moon stuff, I think he did a thing with Chris Seaver where they ran through their history with Full Moon, and that guy actually got to go on a really rad tour of Full Moon Studios back in the day when he was like 14 or something like that.
Nice. Heading over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
SeptumSin versus the world. We do a lot of things with physical media here, new pickups and release information. Of course, I'll let Jake talk about what we've been doing recently,
Mhm.
so I can shorten my stuff out. I do work with Inside Movies Galore in order to try and help us move forward. Next month is going to be a big birthday month. So a lot of our lineup is going to be kind of a surprise. So we'll surprise you next week with that.
Hmm.
Alrighty, let's go over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, my name's Jake. I'm also a co-host of SeptumSin versus the World. Also a big-time movie fan, collector, and what have you here in Central Virginia, where I have recently co-founded a nursery that we're still working to get off the ground. I also work, a couple other jobs, but when I don't, I'm watching stuff in preparation for our discussions with you fine folks here. As Brandon said, we've had a lot going on with the channel. Last night we had our monthly anime discussion where we covered Roger's pick, Shikabane Hime, which was kind of fun. And we had a pretty good talk out of that, I think. And I believe we decided on those of Hunnell's for next month. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Indeed.
Mo's selection there. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. We did our 200th
some highbrow
anniversary.
shit right there.
Exactly. We did our 200th pickup video anniversary special a couple weeks back, and that was a lot of fun too. And our big movie awards, the Versus Awards, SeptumSin versus the Awards, rather, will be coming up shortly. And the votes are tallied, and we're getting everything together, and we'll be able to enjoy that very soon. And of course, this month we on this channel we got to do my suggestion, which was August in the Asylum, and I think it turned out pretty good. I think we had some fun movies this month, and I hope everyone kind of feels that way. But I think it was a fun bit of discussions to have there.
Definitely. And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with me on this the journey through the insane. So appreciate it, all of you. And hopefully we have many more fun adventures to share with each other. So but I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, which and I kind of want to say to you, Jake, the whole reason why we started doing the pre-shows was to, in fact, give some what shall I say, action on the Delusions of Grandeur channel as well, to keep it active. So, and I do think that we can count the discussions that we do on that particular channel as doing them. So it will work for what you're wanting. So when we do films like the first one to the second one, we'll do
Right.
So
we can talk more about that after show too.
Right.
But I go on about my own pickups and my own reviews on the channel, so definitely take a like, share, and subscribe to both Inside Movies Galore, Delusions of Grandeur, and all the rest of these fine folks who share the YouTube space. So looking forward to next week, and we'll have to let you know what we have in store next week. So stay tuned for some more exciting stuff.
All right.